A mercenary who does not die is considered third-rate. On a desolate battlefield beneath a gloomy sky, bodies fall as crows circle overhead. That is the reason their price is so high. A knight in battle-worn armor raises his sword, which shines with an intense light. It is because they are willing to die for their lord. The blade pierces a man, his life extinguished in an instant. Even if I have to listen to my employer's nonsense every single day. A golden liquid, probably liquor, is poured out vigorously. Well, what can you do? With a resigned gesture, a man spills the contents of his flask onto the ground. That is the life of a mercenary. A lone man sits atop a fortress wall, gazing at a landscape devastated by fire and war. This is Jack, captain of the Fang Mercenary Corps. With a cynical look, he thinks to himself, nobles, they're so predictable. As the wind ruffles his hair, Jack continues his thoughts. When they need you, they promise land and make grand requests as if they're going to grant you a title. But in the end, every single one of them changes their story as if on cue, spouting all kinds of creative nonsense. A bitter smile forms on his face. Standing on the wall with the burning battlefield behind him, Jack addresses the person in front of him. But what you just said surpassed everything. Jack smiles in disbelief, his red eyes gleaming with a mix of defiance and mockery. I must have misheard you, he says sarcastically. The camera pulls back, revealing Jack on the castle wall, facing a commander in armor beneath a purple-tinged twilight sky. Before him stands the commander-in-chief of the army, a man with reddish hair and imposing armor. Jack questions the order he has just received. The commander's expression is cold and resolute. You did not mishear, he confirms in an icy voice. I just told you to die. Jack, shocked by the bluntness, asks if the commander has forgotten who he is. But the commander remembers perfectly. I haven't forgotten. You are Jack, captain of the Fang Mercenary Corps. Jack bursts into laughter, saying something like that while knowing who I am, he says incredulously. I didn't know you were capable of telling jokes. Jack grips the hilt of his sword. His expression hardens. He knew it was not an order, because otherwise you wouldn't be asking a worthless mercenary like me to die an honorable death on the battlefield, like one of your noble knights. His red eyes shine with contempt as he smiles coldly, exposing the hypocrisy of the situation. The wind blows across the wall as the two men stare each other down. The tension between mercenary and noble is palpable. The commander lowers his gaze for a moment, as if reconsidering his words. Perhaps I was too direct, he admits. Jack returns his gaze with skepticism, not believing the sudden change in tone. A misunderstanding? The commander asks, placing a hand over his chest and adopting a more solemn tone. I simply wish to entrust you with one final mission. Jack listens, his face impassive, already anticipating betrayal. The commander begins to explain. As you know, with our string of defeats, our downfall is nearly certain. A wide shot shows Jack on the wall, watching the city burn, a grim reminder of the desperate state of the war and the forces drawing near. On the battlefield, a group of fully armored soldiers bearing a purple banner prepares itself. These are the forces that will soon decide the fate of this war. The commander continues, revealing that the swords of traitors, once protectors of this land, are now aimed at the throat of the Crawford family. Realizing there was no retreat, he trails off. The family banner lies torn against the walls of the ruined castle. Jack smiles smugly and opens his arms. Ah, given the circumstances, he says, as if accepting the madness of it all. With a malicious grin showing his teeth, Jack says, I understand perfectly, Commander. But his thoughts reveal his true intention. It seems it's already time for me to get out of here. In his mind, Jack reflects on the commander, a man with unparalleled talent throughout the empire. For someone like him to be cornered says everything. Still, for a noble, he was a sensible man. It's a shame things have come to this. And yet, a final mission in the midst of all this. Jack still doesn't fully understand the order. Does he want me to scout an escape route or something? If that's all, I can chalk it up as one last job before collecting the rest of my pay. Finally, the commander reveals the plan. The mission is simple. Tomorrow, the traitors will launch a full-scale assault. Stay with me and stop their attack, even if only for a moment, until our lord escapes safely. The commander looks toward the burning city. No, if even that is impossible, then until I die. With a somber, resolute gaze, the commander reveals the true and fatal objective of the mission. As payment, the commander offers a massive red gemstone. I will settle the remainder of your pay with this when you withdraw, he says, his tone laden with sinister meaning. Jack catches the gem as the commander tosses it to him. His mind quickly calculates its value. A gemstone of this size should be more than enough to cover the operating costs of your company for 3 years. The red gem falls, symbolizing the blood that will be shed. Holding the gem, the commander's expression darkens as he asks calmly, what is the meaning of this? Jack's anger finally explodes. That's what I should be asking you, he shouts. Did you really take me for a fool just because I'm always smiling? You're ordering us to become your meat shields. Jack and his mercenaries are shown from behind, a small force facing an overwhelming fate. Jack's face twists with fury. Even if we help you, we can only hold out for a short time. You're discarding us just to buy your master a little more time to run. Fine. Let's say by some miracle we manage to hold them off. Then what? The scene shows soldiers' bodies impaled on stakes shakes, a grim reminder of the enemy's cruelty. Do you really think those bastards will let us go? Jack faces the commander once more on the wall, his silhouette cut against the sunset sky. You are... Jack begins, his voice filled with accusation. The commander responds with cold, brutal logic. You are mercenaries, not knights. The enemy knows that too. Once I die, the army will collapse. Jack bursts into manic laughter. Exactly, he shouts with a savage grin. That's how things work in this business. Then Jack's expression turns cunning. But you know it very well, don't you? He says, hinting that the commander has overlooked a crucial detail. To those demons, our mercenary company is nothing more than a sworn enemy that must be slaughtered without hesitation. The scene shifts to a dark forest filled with corpses, revealing an ambush that has already taken place. In the dark forest, a soldier coughs while another, wearing the same armor, watches from a distance. The second soldier approaches, hand raised in what seems like help or camaraderie, but it is a deadly trap. The approaching soldier is not a comrade, but one of Jack's mercenaries in disguise. With a swift, silent motion, he pins the unsuspecting knight against a tree and drives a knife into his back. Eyes wide with shock and pain, the knight collapses. His death is the silent signal that unleashes hell in the forest. Yeka's ambush has begun, and the massacre follows. The knights, their guard down, are slaughtered one by the swords of disguised mercenaries. One knight, seeing his comrades fall, realizes the truth in horror. Ha! It's a trap! Jack shouts, looking out from behind his helmet, red eyes glowing in the darkness. Panic spreads. They're not allies, they're the Fang mercenaries. A soldier screams before being silenced forever. A furious commander on horseback roars, You bastards! To think you'd disguise yourselves as our fallen soldiers? His face twisted with rage, he continues, You know nothing of honor. Honor is for dogs. Before he can finish, a sword whistles through the air and cleanly decapitates him. His severed head hits the ground with a dull thud, bringing the battle to a brutal end. Jack, his helmet splattered with blood, observes the scene with chilling calm, his red eye visible through the visor. Back on the wall, the red gem lies on the ground. Jack explains to the commander, I've taken the heads of several commanders. Surely you understand that this is how we've managed to survive for so long. Jack approaches the commander with a mocking smile. Right now, those bastards are far more interested in tearing us apart than chasing after your lord. The commander's jaw tightens, visibly shaken by Jack's revelation and the audacity of his plan. Jack mocks the commander's naive strategy. Don't tell me, you really counted on this? On us drawing all of their attention? The commander regains his composure and warns Jack coldly, You'd better focus on completing your mission. Otherwise, killing you and taking command of the mercenary corps is the only option left. The commander prepares to strike. With a swift movement, he attacks, sending Jack flying and smashing him hard against the battlements. Injured and on the ground, Jack looks at the commander with disappointment and rage. I really thought you were a little different from the other nobles. Turns out you're the worst scum of all. From across the wall, the commander offers an apology. My apologies, and I mean that sincerely. Jack, his hand on the hilt of his sword, replies, There's no need to apologize. In fact, this is for the best. As for the head of a bastard like you, even if I offered it to those lurking demons, I doubt I'd regret it. Anticipating Jack's move, the commander asks, Are you thinking of offering my head to the traitors and begging for your life? Then he answers himself, Yes, as much as I would love to hand you over and flee, I'm certain you've already made arrangements to stop us. His eyes gleam, acknowledging Jack's cunning. In that case, as commander, I must fulfill my duty to the very end. The rebels will be satisfied with the heads of 2 commanders, and in exchange, they will spare the lives of my men. Jack is left speechless. 2, he says, staring at the commander in disbelief. Don't tell me. To save your subordinates, you plan to offer your own head as well? An open box reveals the severed head of the commander. Jack's men killed in the forest. The commander's gaze grows distant and melancholic. All those people, he says, referring to his soldiers, I dragged them along with me. I promised them I would show them that dreams can still be reached, even if you start from the very bottom. With a glint of respect in his eyes, the commander continues, They placed their faith in me, and I followed me all the way here, so I, too, must shoulder that responsibility. Jack, standing with his sword in hand before the silhouettes of his mercenaries, understands the weight of those words perfectly. Because I am their leader. The commander, hearing the echo of his own sense of duty in Jack's words, is momentarily left breathless, surprised by the similarity between them. A bitter laugh escapes Jack's lips. Yeah, that's right. Both of them are bound by loyalty to their men. That is the mark of a true leader, the commander thinks, gazing at the wall where their conflict reached its climax. What a pity, the commander says, covering his mouth with his gauntlet. If only it weren't for Crawford. With a look of deep and genuine regret, the commander voices his final wish. If only you had been my lord. Driven by duty, the commander lunges forward, his sword ready to deliver the final blow. Jack, already wounded, can only let out a cry of rage and pain as the commander's attack strikes him. The commander straightens solemnly, his duty fulfilled. As Jack's body lies motionless, his green eyes narrow with a mixture of determination and sorrow. He has done what he believes believed was necessary. His final plea echoes in the air. Do not forgive me, Jack. With a flash, the scene cuts, symbolizing the fatal strike. As life fades from his eyes, Jack thinks, I expected this outcome, but I never imagined the gap between us would be so great. His body is thrown backward by the force of the commander's final blow. As he falls, he reflects on the injustice of fate. This thing they call talent. Well, I suppose this is it. With one last satisfied smile, Jack finds peace. I told them to flee immediately if I didn't return by the appointed time, so I can die without worries. Blood drips onto the stone floor, marking the end of his life. After all, I was always prepared for an ending like this. Still, there is only one thing I wonder. His consciousness dissolves into darkness, surrounded by what seem like droplets of blood, or memories. If only I had been given the same opportunity as you. In the darkness, a distant, pleading voice calls out, Master, please. Jack's eyes slowly open. A blinding light floods everything. A voice insists, wake up. A young man lies in a luxurious bed while a servant leans over him. Jack, now in the body of a blonde youth, looks around in confusion. Who are you? He asks weakly. He raises a pale, delicate hand, adorned with lace, one he does not recognize as his own. Suddenly, the desperate young servant slaps him. Please, wake up! He shouts, his face filled with anguish. Jack's eyes snap open, startled by the impact. He feels the sting on his cheek. What? What is this? He thinks, completely disoriented. I just got slapped. Out of nowhere. What a bastard. His mercenary fury resurfaces, but it is interrupted by the servant's sobs. The young man with orange hair begs him desperately. Please, recover. The servant shouts the name that changes everything. Young Master Lucian! Jack sits upright in bed, his mercenary mind utterly lost in the luxurious bedroom and the unfamiliar name he has been given. His golden eyes widen in disbelief and confusion as his thoughts go blank. This is not his body. This is not his name. His entire world has been turned upside down. Lucian awakens in a lavish bed, feeling completely disoriented. Beside him, the young servant appears to be crying. In his mind, a single thought repeats wherever he looks. With panic on his face, he stares at his hands. Realizing something is terribly wrong, his thoughts race. He remembers his mercenary hands, rough, scarred, and full of blisters. What happened to them? He looks at his current hands. Not only are they clean, they are delicate, soft hands befitting a young noble, something he never had. As he gets out of bed, completely confused, the red-haired servant clings to the sheets, sobbing uncontrollably. Lucian understands nothing. Who is this guy? A moment ago, he almost killed him, and now he's crying his eyes out. The shock is too much, and Lucian collapses back onto the bed, overwhelmed. Seeing him move, the servant bursts into tears of joy, shouting in relief that the young master is alive. He thought he had died, and his heart nearly stopped. Hans, his personal attendant, drops to his knees. He murmurs that if something had happened to him, it wouldn't have been just his problem, but a great tragedy for the house. Lucian listens in disbelief. He has no idea what nonsense the servant is talking about. Young master, personal attendant, house. None of those words have anything to do with the life he knew. More than anything, he is certain of one thing. He died on that battlefield. It was a death no one could have survived. He touches his neck, finding it intact, and wonders how it is still attached to his head after being decapitated. A tense silence fills the room as Lucian processes the impossible reality of his situation, with Hans kneeling beside him. With a serious look, he begins to connect the dots. All the clues point to a single, shocking conclusion. At this moment, he has taken over the body of a complete stranger. He rises from the bed, determined. A mischievous smile forms on his face as he realizes his new opportunity, and it is no ordinary body. He looks into the mirror and discovers that he now possesses an incredibly handsome face. He examines himself from head to toe before an ornate mirror, while Hans watches from a distance, bewildered. He touches his reflection. At a glance, it is obvious that this elegant body belongs to a noble, and not just any noble, but one from a disgustingly wealthy family. Judging by the luxury surrounding him, Lucian turns to Hans. First things first. He needs to gather more information. He clears his throat and addresses the servant. Look, Hans, I have something to ask you. Startled but eager, Hans assures him that he can ask anything. Lucian gets straight to the point with his first crucial question. What year is it? Hans, surprised, attributes the strange question to the effects of the medicine, thinking his master is still dazed. With a nervous smile, Hans answers that it is the year 846 of the imperial calendar. The answer leaves Lucian in shock, unable to process what he has just heard. What? He whispers to himself. As the stunning truth settles in, the realization hits him hard. The year 846. That is 15 years before the day he died. He realizes that not only has he reincarnated, he has gone back in time. Lucian sighs, running a hand through his hair. He has no idea how any of this happened, but he knows panicking over every detail will solve nothing. He decides to remain calm and think clearly. With a determined gaze, he focuses on what needs to be done. His first task is to extract information revelation from his personal attendant, Hans. With an icy, threatening voice, he says, "It seems you've decided to die today." The poor servant freezes in terror, unable to understand his master's sudden change. Lucian grabs Hans, acting like an offended noble. How dare a mere servant lay a hand on the unconscious body of his master, without permission no less? He continues, applying intimidating pressure. "Have the rules of this place changed? If not, answer me this." With a piercing gaze that freezes Hans to the soul, Lucian asks the key question that this entire act was meant to uncover. "Who am I?" Hans's eyes widen in pure panic and confusion at his master's question. Terrified, he bows deeply. "Please forgive me, young master. I made a grave mistake because I was too shaken," he cries desperately. Between sobs of panic, Hans finally reveals his master's identity. "You are the young master, Lucian Waldeck, the third son of the esteemed House Waldeck." Lucian freezes. The name Waldeck echoes in his mind, bringing with it a flood of memories from his past life. The banner bearing the golden lion emblem of Waldeck appears in his thoughts. Impossible. The Waldeck family. The image of an incredibly opulent mansion comes to mind. It is the same House Waldeck that he knew as a mercenary. The emblem of House Waldeck, one of the most powerful noble families in the Empire, shines vividly in his memory. He recalls their prestige, a noble family that, as a pillar of the Empire, has long stood beside the Emperor himself, a house so distinguished that its power rivals even that of the imperial family. Lucian Jack remembers being intimately familiar with this family's affairs because 15 years ago, he worked as a guard at House Waldeck for several years. The irony is brutal. He died and awakened in his former workplace. Reality strikes him again. Not only has he reincarnated into the family he once served, but he is the third son of House Waldeck. A small ironic smile forms on his face. "Ha, this is ridiculous," he thinks to himself. He recalls his past life, his low social standing, being despised and humiliated by nobles who tossed coins at him like he was a dog. He remembers enduring every imaginable hardship, walking bloodied and alone through cemeteries filled with fallen comrades. And now, after all that suffering, he is given an opportunity, now of all times? The question echoes with a bitter taste of irony. He always wondered how high he might have risen if he had been given the same opportunities as others. Now it seems fate itself is giving him the chance to find out. The image of his former self shatters, and with it, the chains of his old life. He accepts his new reality with steely resolve, making a vow to fate. "Very well, if this is the opportunity you're giving me, then keep your eyes open and watch." With renewed determination, Lucian opens the door to his room, ready to face his new life. He steps onto a balcony bathed in sunlight, a symbolic new beginning for his second chance at life. With a confident smile, he promises himself and the world, "Just watch how high I can climb, and what kind of life I'll live." The camera pulls back to reveal the magnificence of the Waldeck estate, a palace that dwarfs anything he has ever known. Now dressed in noble attire, he walks through the opulent corridors alongside Hans. He thinks to himself that, as expected of the Waldeck estate, the luxury is overwhelming. He has been to many places as a mercenary, but this is by far the most extravagant and ostentatious place he has ever seen. As he observes the other servants, he realizes that this is the place he will have to get used to, and quickly. However, his sharp mercenary instincts notice something strange in the atmosphere. He realizes that ever since he left his room, all the servants have been staring at him oddly, whispering among themselves. "Is that really young Master Lucian?" Some murmur in surprise. He finally came out. "How long has it been?" Shock is evident on their faces. Lucian feels the weight of the household staff's gazes, watching him from the shadows with curiosity and unease. He turns to Hans and asks whether it's just his imagination, or if the atmosphere feels strange. Hans explains that it's natural, since the young master locked himself away and saw no one but him for a year and 2 months. The revelation comes as accompanied by a grim image of the original. Lucian lying collapsed on the floor of a dark room stained red. Lucian cannot understand it. Locked away for more than a year, he wonders what could possibly be lacking for the son of a duke to behave in such a self-destructive way. He reflects that, even without understanding the logic of nobles, it should have been impossible for Lucian to act so freely in a household this strict, especially considering the head of the family, Archduke Sigmund, a giant of a man who protected the empire with unshakable principles and convictions. Lucian knows there is no way a man like the Archduke would allow his own son to waste away in a corner. The image shows the Archduke watching a bedridden Lucian. Lucian reaches a logical conclusion. Either Lucian was such a troublemaker that he was on the verge of being disinherited, or there was a reason compelling enough for the Archduke to turn a blind eye. He decides that until he uncovers the truth, he must avoid the Archduke at all costs. But at that very moment, a figure blocks his path. An older man approaches. "So it seems the reports of your complete recovery were true," he says in a calm voice. Hans and Lucian stop in surprise. It is the chief butler, a gray-haired man with a gentle smile, who expresses his immense joy at seeing the young master's face after a full year. He addresses him formally. "Young Master Lucian." The butler asks whether he is having any difficulty moving. Lucian recognizes him as a member of the household, while Hans trembles visibly at his side. A profile introduces this new character, the chief butler, Edwin. Although he arrived at the mansion as a hostage from an enemy family, his exceptional talents were recognized, and he was placed in charge of all domestic affairs. The most important revelation about Edwin is that despite his kind smile and green eyes, he is the right-hand man of Archduke Sigmund. Lucian looks at him and curses his luck. This is bad. He has run into one of the last people he wanted to see. He knows that a man as sharp as Edwin would immediately notice the manners of someone from the streets. Lucian thinks quickly. His only saving grace is that the chief butler likely has not seen Lucian for an entire year. There is no recent point of comparison. In that case, his mercenary cunning offers a solution. He will have to imitate the most noble person he knows, based on years of observation. With a perfectly practiced smile, he addresses the butler. "Thank you for your concern, Chief Butler Edwin." Putting on his performance, he adopts a charming posture. "I've improved greatly thanks to you," he says, playing the role of a grateful young noble perfectly. He justifies his sudden appearance. "Since I've been shut away all this time, I came out to assess the state of the family," he adds flirtatiously. "To think I would run into you. The gods must be smiling on me." Cleverly, he turns the conversation back to Edwin. "So I trust the family has been well, yes?" Edwin watches him silently for a moment, evaluating him. Then Edwin replies with a courteous smile. "Yes, young master. House Valdek is as strong as ever, and it is a relief to see that you two are well." Lucian laughs inwardly in relief. "Haha, come to think of it, how could there be any problem with you here?" Internally, he concludes that Edwin does not seem suspicious. Believing he has passed the test, he decides to withdraw. "It seems I worried for nothing," he says as he turns away. "Well then, I'll take my leave in peace. It's my first time out in a while, and I'm exhausted." But Edwin's voice stops him cold. "Forgive my bluntness, young master, but I must ask you to delay your return." Lucian's blood runs cold. His escape plan has failed. With a serious expression, Edwin delivers the news Lucian feared most. "Archduke Sigmund wishes to see you immediately, young master." Lucian slowly turns around, panic reflected in his eyes. The very person he had decided to avoid at all costs. The scene shifts to a vast, imposing office. Lucian stands alone before the enormous desk of his father. Seated in a chair that resembles a throne is Archduke Sigmund, an imposing man wearing a mask that conceals part of his face. The silence is heavy as he calls out to his son, "Young master." Lucian stands rigid and motionless, before the most powerful man he has ever known, his new father. The Archduke speaks, his voice echoing through the room. "I will ask you a question, Lucian Valdek." Lucian's face tightens in fear, cold sweat forming under his father's gaze. The Archduke leans forward. His visible eye gleams with a menacing light as he asks the most terrifying question Lucian could have imagined. "How are you still alive?" Continuing from the previous chapter. Lewin Wok is summoned before his father, the Grand Duke Sigmund Wok. The atmosphere in the room is tense and oppressive, with the Grand Duke sitting imposingly behind his desk, staring at his son, Lucian, or rather Jack in Lucian's body, who looks utterly confused by the situation. Lucian asks his father what he means by those words, unable to comprehend the hostility directed at him. Grand Duke Sigmund responds coldly, stating that he had intended to overlook Lucian's actions, implying that his patience has run out. The Duke accuses Lucian of using his mother's death as an excuse to neglect his duties and behave like a spoiled child. A portrait of his deceased mother is revealed, adding weight to his harsh words. Clenching his fist, the Grand Duke continues, declaring that Lucian has finally crossed the line. He accuses Lucian of staging a protest by locking himself away for over a year. Sigmund's anger reaches its peak when he accuses Lucian of treating his own life lightly and attempting to harm himself, referring to an alleged suicide attempt. Lucian is completely bewildered. As Jack has no memory of the actions of the body he now inhabits, he wonders what his father is talking about. Suddenly, a fragmented image appears in Jack's mind, not from his own memory, but perhaps from the actual event. The young Lucian lies in bed, someone beside him in panic. The vision reveals the servant Hans, crying uncontrollably, realizing the reason behind the commotion. This is what truly happened, an event Jack had never known about. Back in the present, Lucian tries to calm the situation, addressing his father and suggesting that there must be a misunderstanding, but the Grand Duke interrupts him. His patience is clearly exhausted, his authority absolute. Grand Duke Sigmund demands that Lucian confess his true intentions and the thoughts he has been hiding. He continues pressing him, asking whether the purpose of his actions was not, in fact, to use his weak body to cause a scandal. The Duke reveals the full accusation. Lucian took sleeping pills to create an uproar. The revelation strikes Jack hard, as he realizes that the original owner of the body attempted a fake suicide to draw attention. At that moment, the truth hits Jack. He remembers why the name Lucian had never sounded familiar in his past life. Finally, the missing piece falls into place. The scene rewinds 15 years. Jack recalls his past life as a guard at the Valdek estate. He remembers hearing about the third son of the family, Lewin Valdek. The key memory that surfaces is devastating. Jack remembers that the original Lewin Valdek died. That is why he had no memories of him. He was supposed to be dead. The head of the family is formally introduced, Grand Duke Segmund Valdek, linking the man of the present with Jack's memories of the past. Jack recalls the complex family structure. The Grand Duke has 4 children, each from a different mother, creating a potentially volatile family dynamic. During his 10 years as a guard, Jack encountered the other young lords and their mothers on several occasions. However, he realizes that he never came face to face with either Lucian or his mother. They were absent figures in his memories of the estate. Jack recalls the facts as he knew them. Lucian's mother died of illness shortly after Jack began working there, and shortly after that, for reasons unknown to him at the time, the young Lucian also died, following his mother into death. Back in the present, Jack's mind races. He realizes that the story he had always assumed, that mother and son were simply ill, was a facade. There was a hidden reason behind their deaths. Jack now understands the immense pressure the original young Lucian must have endured. The death of his mother, combined with his precarious position within the family, became a burden far too heavy for his young age. Thus, the truth is fully revealed. In a desperate attempt to gain even a sliver of his father's attention, the fragile Lucian took a nearly lethal dose of sleeping pills. It was not an act meant to end his life, but a cry for help that tragically led to fatal consequences. Jack's internal monologue continues, uncovering the grim reality. During his year-long seclusion, the weakened body of the original Lucian could not withstand the effects of the drug he took to draw attention. The result was a fatal accident. The young Lucian simply died there, a silent, unintended end to his desperate plea for help. With this new understanding, Jack realizes the complexity of the situation. He thinks that the Grand Duke's harsh reprimand, though severe toward a son he had not seen in a year, now makes sense. From the Grand Duke's perspective, such rage is natural. After all, his son had toyed with his own life, pushing his father to the brink of despair. Jack reasons that regardless of his title, Sigmund is first and foremost a father whose child stood on the edge of death. His inner fury must be immense. However, with iron determination, Jack decides that this is not the time to be considerate of others' feelings. His own survival is at stake. He stands on the edge of a precipice. He recalls the Duke's last words, recognizing them as a final ultimatum. One wrong move could ruin everything. He feels immense pressure, as if the ground beneath his feet is cracking. His golden future, this second chance at life, hangs by a thread. The risks are enormous. If he gives an answer that fails to satisfy the Grand Duke, his fate could be grim. He imagines the possible punishments: being sent as a priest to a remote monastery, forced to renounce the secular world forever, or worse, being dragged to a harsh northern territory, condemned to a life of suffering, battling cold and beasts for the rest of his days. Jack vehemently rejects those futures. This new life was hard-earned, obtained, even after having his head cut off in his previous life. He will not waste it. With a defiant smile, he asks himself whether he will allow the personal affairs of another family, the tragedy of the original Lucian, to ruin this precious future. Having made his decision, Lucian addresses his father. He begins by saying that he will speak, as he was asked to do. First, he apologizes for staining the name of Valdek with his foolishness, and for causing his father great worry. With a bow of his head and a hand over his heart, he offers his sincerest apologies, adopting an appearance of remorse and respect. While meanwhile, the head butler, Edwin, watches in silence, surprised by the sudden change in the young master's behavior. Lucian continues, declaring that the fault is his alone with no excuses, and that he will accept whatever punishment his father chooses to impose. But then he changes tactics. He argues that saying this now will change nothing, and therefore this is the moment to look forward. He boldly asks his father whether it would not be right to rejoice wholeheartedly, celebrating the fact that his son, whom he believed lost, is still alive. The Grand Duke appears taken aback by the sudden turn, repeating Lucian's words, "What has happened has happened. It is irreversible." Lucian steps forward with confidence, arguing that instead of tying the life that was saved from the brink of death to the past any longer, he should move on. He brings his heels together with newly found determination, ready to declare his new purpose. With a clear and steady voice, he proclaims, "I intend to live diligently for the future that awaits me." With a sly smile, he makes his bold request. "I ask you not as the Grand Duke, but as a father. Please, offer me just a single word of encouragement." The Grand Duke, Sigmund, listens with a hardened expression. As Lucian presents his final and most manipulative argument, Lucian claims that it is a father's duty to willingly embrace a child who sincerely repents, appealing directly to the bond between parent and child above status and duty. He concludes by framing his audacious request, not as insolence, but as the sacred duty that binds a father and son under the laws of heaven. The head butler Edwin is completely stunned by the scene unfolding before him. Incredible, he thinks to himself, unable to process the change in the young master. Edwin had sensed that Lucian's aura had changed, but this far exceeded his expectations. He remembers Lucian from the past as a child who was always cowering in fear and anxiety. The person now standing confidently before the Duke is unrecognizable. In disbelief, Edwin wonders if this truly is the young Master Lucian. The transformation is so drastic that he doubts his own eyes. A tense silence fills the room as the Grand Duke processes his son's words. The tension is palpable. Lucian waits, his heart pounding, watching his father for any sign of how he will proceed. At last, the Grand Duke breaks the silence, his voice filled with feigned anger. "How dare you?" he begins, raising his voice as if to lecture him on the duties of a father. But then a faint smile forms on his lips, breaking his severe facade. The Duke leans back, a chuckle of amusement in his voice. "I've lived long enough to have seen it all," he remarks, more entertained than angry by his son's audacity. Internally, Lucian lets out a sigh of relief. His gambit has worked. He can barely contain his joy. Sweat from the tension drips down his forehead as the realization of success washes over him. It worked, he thinks, his heart racing. Reflecting on his strategy, he knows that a clumsy apology would have been useless. Confronting him boldly was the only answer. This was the Grand Duke Waldeck that Jack remembered from his previous life, a man who valued the spirit of a wild dog that knows how to bite more than that, of a rat tiptoeing on eggshells. His bold move was calculated to appeal to his father's true nature. The Grand Duke comments dryly, "It seems you've learned to be quite shameless after returning from the dead," acknowledging both Lucian's audacity and the seriousness of his recent condition. "Very well," the Duke says, conceding. "Since you yourself mentioned diligence, I'll ask you first." He asks him directly, "Lucian Waldeck, what do you intend to do from now on?" Having won this battle, Lucian replies that first of all he will fix his broken body. A flash of his past life passes through him, the image of his former self, a powerful mercenary at the peak of his strength, recalling the feeling of a sword in his hands, gleaming with power. That is the self he aspires to return to. The vision of his battle-hardened, former self contrasts sharply with his current state, fueling his determination. Back in the present, he declares his next intention. "I intend to properly learn the sword." The Duke is surprised. "The sword?" he asks skeptically. Lucian confirms, acknowledging that he first needs to resolve the problem of his paper doll body. He adds casually that if he eats and sleeps diligently, it will somehow work out. The Duke watches him in silence, processing the bold declaration. Finally, a smile spreads across the Grand Duke's face. "You certainly have a way with words," he admits, granting his son the verbal victory. Intrigued, the Grand Duke decides to test Lucian, to see whether his bold words are merely a bluff or if there is truly new determination behind them. As a first sign of his decision, the Duke turns to his butler, Edwin, and orders, "Butler, give him that again." Edwin smiles inwardly, thinking that rather than a few hollow words, this would be far more useful to the young master in his current condition. Lucian, on the other hand, is utterly confused, a bead of sweat running down his forehead as he wonders what that could be. Edwin bows and confirms the order. "Understood, my lord. I will process it so it is available immediately." Back in his room, Lucian remains perplexed. What is that?" he wonders, completely in the dark about what awaits him. Soon, the answer arrives at his door. An enormous, heavy wooden chest is carried across the mansion grounds by two servants. The chest is so heavy that the servants struggle to bring it into Lucian's chambers. When it is opened, a dazzling treasure is revealed. The chest is filled to the brim with gold coins, jewels, and precious necklaces. Lucian and his personal servant, Hans, stare in astonishment at the incredible wealth. "Ha! This is ridiculous!" Lucian exclaims, overwhelmed by the scene. Looking out over the vast city from his window, he realizes the truth. This was an absurdly enormous monthly allowance, the scale of wealth possessed by a high noble. He scoops up a handful of gold coins, astonished that such a fortune is meant for a single month. With this, the possibilities are endless. A mischievous smile spreads across his face. With this amount of money, his ambitious plan might actually work. With this, it's worth trying. At last, his true goal is revealed. With this wealth, he can gather the ingredients to completely reform this weak body. With burning determination, he declares internally, "I can make that elixir," connecting the knowledge of his past life with the resources of his new one to forge a powerful future. The scene opens in a magnificent, brightly lit greenhouse filled with beautiful flowers of vibrant colors. The Grand Duke, an imposing man with blonde hair and beard, walks with an authoritative air. Behind him follows his loyal and veteran butler, Edwin. As they walk, Edwin reflects that this greenhouse was a place especially cherished by the late Grand Duchess during her lifetime. He continues thinking to himself that the Grand Duke had not visited this place for quite some time, so his presence here must hold special meaning. The reason, Edwin concludes, is the recent and remarkable change in the young Master Lucian. Although he briefly lost his father's favor, Edwin knows that as the son of the Grand Duchess whom the Duke loved so dearly, there is no way he would abandon him so easily. The Grand Duke continues continues his firm, decisive stride through the greenhouse corridor, lost in his own thoughts. His thoughts, however, are far more critical. He recalls Lucian's past behavior, considering it truly pathetic. The image of the old Lucian lingers in his mind, a boy constantly looking around nervously, as if afraid of something, who would whine like a wild dog if his voice was raised even slightly. Edwin addresses him respectfully. "My lord," despite the harsh thoughts occupying the Duke's mind. The Duke reflects that Lucian's attitude was very different from his mother's, and that he resembled her only in physical appearance. Edwin's expression shows surprise as the Duke's inner monologue takes a turn. For the first time that day, with a faint smile, the Grand Duke admits to himself that the thought crossed his mind that he might have been wrong about his son all along. The Duke says to Edwin, "You must have seen it too. That child looked me straight in the eyes and expressed his opinion." Edwin confirms, "Yes, there was not a single hesitation. It was a truly resolute and confident bearing." With a gentler perspective, Edwin thinks that the young Master Lucian had a tender heart and deep thoughts, merely hesitating slightly compared to the other young masters. He concludes that, after all, Lucian has inherited his lord's blood. Despite Edwin's remarks, the Grand Duke remains skeptical and reserved, replying simply, "That remains to be seen." He adds that the tasks that will confront that child from now on are things that can never be resolved, with just a few words, hinting that he intends to test Lucian. With a worried expression, Edwin interrupts his lord's thoughts. "My lord, however, there is a problem." The Duke, intrigued, asks, "A problem?" Edwin explains, "Although the support funds for the young Master Lucian have been reinstated, it has been confirmed that the circumstances of some of them have leaked outside." The scene shifts to reveal the culprit. After an investigation, it appears that the second young master, Geordie Waldeck, is involved, burning a letter with a malicious smile. Edwin reports that Geordie dismissed the head maid who had been attending Lucian and replaced her with one of his own close associates, revealing his intention to keep Lucian under surveillance. The Duke clicks his tongue, acknowledging that Geordie is capable but narrow-minded. With a somber expression, he reflects that he understands Geordie harbors deep resentment toward Lucian due to matters involving their maternal families, but he did not expect him to be this persistent. Edwin asks whether they should take separate measures, but the Duke stops him. "No, Butler, do not interfere in this matter." Concerned, Edwin questions whether that is not too harsh for someone who has only just taken his first steps. The Duke looks at the pond, dismissing Geordie's actions as a trivial trick. He states that even this is the price Lucian must pay for failing to come to his senses over the past year, and the perfect test of his new determination. With a calculating gaze, the Duke concludes that the situation actually works well as a test. "Let's see how that child handles this," he thinks. If he cannot manage even this, there would be no reason to hold expectations, for true strength must be forged by one's own hands. The Duke's thoughts end with a powerful visual metaphor, a majestic lion, the symbol of the Waldeck family. Even if the blood of the Waldeck family becomes the key, the door must always be opened with one's own hands. The scene shifts, and a sign indicates that several days have passed. We see the imposing and luxurious mansion of the Waldeck family stands beneath a bright blue sky. In the corridors, two maids gossip as they watch Hans, Lucian's servant, standing guard. "How many days has that guy been doing this?" they whisper. The young master has locked himself in his room again. A close-up of Hans shows his face filled with fury and determination, making it clear that he will not allow anyone to disturb his master. The narration dives into Hans's memories. He is seen in a state of panic, recalling his desperation. It is the third day since the support funds that had been cut off arrived again. In his memory, Lucian had assured Hans that the support was restored because the conversation with the Grand Duke went well. The image shows both Hans and Lucian, visibly relieved and happy, standing beside a large chest. A glimpse inside reveals that it contains not only gold coins, but also jewels, treasures of great value, considerable fortune. Still within the memory, Hans looks at Lucian with concern. He knows that, given the tense relationship between father and son, that conversation could not have been easy for his young master. Hans understands then that Lucian must have gathered tremendous courage to face his father in that way. Hans's loyalty and affection for Lucian are evident. He wipes away his tears, moved by the realization that his master now intends to move forward, even if he must leave sorrow behind. Lucian holds the gold coins indifferently, while behind him Hans is still visibly emotional over the change in his master. Intensity takes hold in Lucian's gaze. His eyes shine with fierce determination and a hidden plan. A cunning, confident smile forms on Lucian's face as he grips the coins. With this amount, it's worth trying, he thinks to himself. Lucian reveals his ambitious goal, to completely rebuild this weak body. "I can make that elixir." An image of a shining potion and a magical herb illustrates his plan. The scene shifts to Lucian's room, which now resembles an alchemy laboratory, where he works diligently at his desk. Lucian pauses to wipe the sweat from his brow, his expression one of pure concentration and effort. As he works, he thinks of his loyal servant. That guy Hans must be bursting with curiosity, but seeing him guarding the door as ordered is quite loyal. The desk is covered with alchemy books and strange preparation tools, things the son of a Grand Duke would normally never have touched in his life. The focus centers on one of the key ingredients, a herb that is extremely expensive because it only grows under moonlight. More information is added about the mysterious plant. Its common use has not even been established yet, making Lucien's gamble even riskier. At last, the name of the plant is revealed, Moonlight Herb. Lucien recalls that he squandered his entire allowance to buy it, a huge gamble based on his future knowledge. In a flashback, we see Lucien giving a crucial order to his servant. Hans, it's not too late. Buy all the Moonlight Herb. Lucien is aware of how others must see him right now, investing a fortune in sacks of an unknown herb. He might look like a madman, but his confidence is founded on a secret only he possesses, knowledge of the future. His eyes shine with absolute certainty as he predicts that in just 1 year, the price of Moonlight Herb will multiply tenfold. No, more than 20-fold. The realization of the immense profit he is about to gain consumes him, and a near-maniacal euphoria takes hold. With a crazed expression of pure greed and anticipation, Lucien rejoices inwardly, exclaiming, "It will skyrocket without limit." Calming himself, Lucien reflects, "Now that I think about it, I have to acknowledge the boldness of the Alchemists' Guild." He remembers that at the time, the success of their research on Moonlight Herb must have been uncertain. Despite that uncertainty, the Alchemists' Guild gathered every Moonlight Herb in the Empire for their research, burning them all in a reckless gamble. It was, as the text says, a lifetime wager on the fate of the guild itself. Lucien reaches out his hand toward the potion he has created, acknowledging that thanks to that past audacity, they succeeded in developing an unprecedented elixir that shook the Empire. The drink of the gods, nectar. He remembers that due to the arrogance of calling a mere drug god, they even faced the danger of being accused of blasphemy. Yet once its effectiveness became known, everyone rushed to praise it as if nothing had happened, forgetting all accusations. Lucien smiles smugly, aware of the full story and the power he is about to wield. The narration explains the fundamental law that nectar shattered, a proposition that had not been denied for more than 1,000 years. That a martial artist's realm is determined at birth. That limit was an absolute law that no one could challenge. Innate nature was destiny, and constitution never changed, a belief as strong as iron chains. What shattered that common sense, that unbreakable law, was nectar. Its power could transform a person from their very essence. Simply by drinking nectar, even those with zero talent could be turned into usable swordsmen, an unprecedented miracle. Lucien looks at his own creation, a bright red potion. He admits that what he made falls far short of the original's effectiveness and is nothing more than a kind of mass-produced substitute. However, as he rolls up his sleeves, his resolve is firm. To raise a body as broken as this, there's nothing better than this right now. With an ironic smile, Lucien addresses the spirit of the previous owner of his body. "Consider yourself lucky, noble young master." He recalls the end of Nectar's story. Later, when a chaotic era spread across the Empire, the Alchemists' Guild became the first target, because the recipe for nectar, which had shaken the balance of power, was itself far too dangerous. Because of that, the recipe vanished from the world. However, Lucien's eyes gleam with a secret. He knows something others do not. Lucien reveals his advantage. "I managed to gather the clues and make something similar somehow." He remembers the painful experiments of his past life, where most test subjects died from side effects. "Anyway, enough talk," he concludes, casting aside the dark past. Without further hesitation, Lucien brings the elixir to his lips and drinks it in one gulp. A wave of blue energy erupts inside him the moment the liquid enters his body. What matters starts now. The potion releases its power. Threads of energy begin to coil within him, the first step in transforming the power of nature into his own. This energy, the vital force now awakening within his body, has a name, mana, and its true power lies in how it circulates through the body. It is explained that the quality and output of the power one can draw differ, drastically depending on how well the process of mana circulation works, spreading it throughout the body and then reclaiming it. Lucien explains his condition. At present, he has borrowed the power of nectar to forcibly widen the blocked pathways inside his body. The energy flows through his astral form, but then Lucien encounters a surprise. He opens his eyes in confusion. The resistance and pain that should occur when accepting mana for the first time do not exist in his body. On the contrary, the mana is spreading without obstruction, as if it has found its rightful place. Currents of energy flow freely and powerfully through him. Lucien is in shock. His eye changes, reflecting his astonishment. Even the body of a newborn baby usually has impurities that block circulation. An incredible truth begins to take shape in his mind. In a striking symbolic scene, he finds himself underwater, looking upward in disbelief. Don't tell me this guy. The final revelation crashes over him like a wave. A colossal, majestic creature, a celestial whale, swims above him, symbolizing the immense potential he has just discovered. He's the type known as a genius. The morning sun bathes the city in warm light, promising a new day. Meanwhile, bell. Inside the mansion, someone waits anxiously by a window. It is Hans, Lucian's personal servant, pacing back and forth, consumed by worry for his master. Suddenly, a sound from the door startles him. His heart leaps with anticipation and fear. The door opens and Lucian appears, disturbingly calm. Nothing happened while you were waiting, right, Hans? Lucian asks. Hans, on the verge of tears, rushes toward him. Young master, he cries. Do you know how long you've been in there? Relief and frustration overwhelm him as he continues through sobs. You didn't even respond when I called you. And you strictly told me not to enter no matter what happened. I was terrified that something terrible had happened, he confesses, wiping his tears in a mix of anger and relief. Lucian places a hand on his servant's shoulder, and Hans finally breaks down, admitting how worried he was. But there is not a trace of guilt on Lucian's face. Instead, a sly, calculating smile curves his lips. A close-up of his eye reveals a sharp, feline pupil. Something has definitely changed in the young master. Hans steps back, unsettled by the strange aura emanating from his lord. Young master? He asks hesitantly. Hans watches him closely, thinking to himself, it's definitely the young master. But why do I have this unsettling feeling that it isn't him? Lucian, or rather the mercenary within his body, smiles inwardly. That Hans, since he cared for Lucian more closely than anyone, he must have noticed the change. The servant's intuition has not failed him. Lucian places a hand on his chest, evaluating his new vessel. The physical body will need time and proper nutrition, so there are no major changes yet. But what matters is the inside. Within him, a mana heart glows with turquoise light, pulsing with newly awakened power. With a smug smile, Lucian knows that his interior is changing at an incredible speed. All of this was possible thanks to Lucian's innate constitution. Potential the original boy never knew he possessed. I'm sure of it, he thinks, conviction burning in his golden eyes. This guy's potential is in the same league as the legends who changed the world. Before him, he sees a gigantic chessboard, and he is the main player. If I play my cards right, I could easily surpass my peak as a mercenary within a year, he concludes with a malicious chuckle. With his plan set, Lucian turns to the bewildered servant. Hans, now that I think about it, I owe this opportunity to you. Hans's confusion is evident, unable to understand what his master means. Before Hans can respond, Lucian grabs him firmly. After all, rewards and punishments must be clear, he declares with an intense gaze, laying the groundwork for an order that will change Hans's life forever. Listen carefully, Hans. I'm only going to say this once. With a manic expression, Lucian commands, gather everything you have, sell even your underwear if you must, and bet it all on me. I guarantee you a smooth journey to the top. He exclaims this with wild laughter and unwavering confidence, overflowing. Then, with a theatrical gesture, Lucian spreads his arms wide and shouts, let's go to the heavens together, leaving Hans completely dumbfounded. In his thoughts, the mercenary revels in it. I'm so jealous of you, Hans. In my time, we didn't have nobles like this. Hans, for his part, can only process the situation with a look of total bewilderment. Young master, 1 week later, the scene shifts to a quiet, lush forest, brimming with life and light. Lucian and Hans walk along the path. For the first time in a long while, Lucian feels relaxed and at peace. He walks with his hands behind his head, whistling a tune, while Hans follows with a worried expression. This is so refreshing, Lucian thinks with a satisfied smile. He allows life to be this easy. He recalls the previous week, banquets served with clockwork precision, an endless stream of delicious food. His room was cleaned without him lifting a finger, attended by a retinue of maids. They even prepared a soft, cozy bed for him, a luxury he had never known before. The contrast is brutal when he remembers how hunger was part of his daily routine in his previous life. A bitter laugh escapes him. Thanks to this, not only was he able to focus fully on his recovery, but he also had the chance to deal with the one thing that had been weighing on his mind. His expression turns serious as he prepares to face his past. He thinks about the existence of Jack, the guard of the Baldique family, his self from a life that feels increasingly distant and blurred. He remembers investigating it. I confirmed with the captain of the guards that no one fitting that description ever applied for the position, and the shift I used to work back then was filled by a complete stranger. The past he remembered simply did not exist in this reality. Lucian clasps his hands, accepting the situation. Honestly, this is for the best. There's no benefit in finding him. It would only be a distraction, and I don't have the confidence to face my past self anyway, he admits, a bead of sweat forming. I'd definitely die of embarrassment. Back in the present, Lucian stops, and a chill of determination runs through his body. Hans looks at him, sensing the change in atmosphere. Lucian turns around with a resolute gaze. Ye young master Lucian, Hans stammers nervously. With panic written all over his face, he asks in a trembling voice, are you really thinking of going in there? The camera shows the brightly lit training grounds as Hans's voice echoes almost like a plea. You said you would never set foot near this place because you hated it with all your soul. Lucian feigns innocence. I did? He asks. Hans, exasperated, shouts, yes, you did! With a trembling voice, he reminds him, ever since the second young master beat you during training, training. You said you would never come back. Lucian processes the information. Judging by Hans's reaction, he gets the picture. Since swordsmanship is a required skill for the sons of the Grand Duke, it was the perfect opportunity for the second young master to torment him under the pretense of training. In a flashback, he sees the young Lucian lying injured on the ground. He realizes that his brother instilled a deep terror of violence in him. It was the perfect way to ensure he would never set foot in the training hall again. A cruel plan executed flawlessly. Lucian smiles at his servant. I understand why you're acting like this, but there's nothing to worry about. That's all in the past, he says indifferently, leaving Hans even more confused and afraid. With a malicious smile, Lucian moves forward. You just need to believe me and follow my lead. His determination is absolute. Finally, Lucian and Hans enter the imposing training hall. Inside, a pair of guards are gossiping. Is that really true? One asks incredulously. Yes, I'm sure, the other confirms. The third young master is looking around the training hall with his personal servant. Hendrik, a man with a twisted mustache, overhears them. He strokes his mustache with a disdainful expression. What the hell was that brat thinking, setting foot in here? He thinks it's impossible that Lucian has forgotten what happened. But then a malicious idea crosses his mind. No, actually this could be for the best. Hendrik orders his subordinate, you, go inform him right now. With a sinister smile, he adds, I'll make sure he's thoroughly cooked by the time he arrives. His intentions are clear. He intends to make Lucian's life miserable. Meanwhile, Lucian is completely absorbed, admiring the place. He had high expectations, but this exceeds them by far. Not only is there a plentiful supply of spare weapons that can be used without worrying about breakage, but there's also a massive space that doesn't restrict even the most intense movements. For the mercenary inhabiting Lucian, it's almost unbelievable to think that a single individual owns a facility like this. A melancholic thought strikes him. If we had trained in a place like this, maybe more of my guys would have survived. Footsteps approach. It's Hendrik, who comes forward with a mocking smile. Well, so I wasn't seeing things after all. To think it's really the third young master. It's such a big surprise that I honestly couldn't believe my eyes. Hendrik continues, dripping with venom. I still vividly remember how you turned tail and ran without looking, back after your lesson with Nordjordi. A year ago. Hans shudders at the words. With a cruel smile, Hendrik mocks how Lucian fled like a frightened lamb. Then his attention shifts to the servant. Seeing Hans trembling, he asks mockingly, Is that why you look so terrified of this place too? Hendrik continues his ridicule, criticizing Lucian for dragging a servant into this sacred hall of warriors. Hans, embarrassed, lowers his head in a shallow bow. It's been a long time. I am Hendrik. I offer my humble greetings. Lucian stares at him unfazed. His eyes glint with malice. A year ago, I personally instructed you on your stance alongside the second young master. Do you remember? Hendrik asks, savoring the memory. A flashback shows the original Lucian trembling in fear, holding a wooden sword, unable to defend himself. The trauma is palpable. Hendrik covers his mouth to stifle a cruel laugh. It was a truly pleasant moment, he says, delighting in another's suffering. But instead of the fear Hendrik expects, Lucian's face lights up with a smile, a dark, hungry smile that bodes ill. Lucian's eyes shine with a predatory light. Look at this insolent little runt, he thinks, smiling to reveal sharp teeth. The mercenary within him concludes, this is going to be fun. A knight, the embodiment of honor and loyalty. Usually born of noble blood, it is customary for them to master both martial arts and proper etiquette from a young age. Only after establishing merit on the battlefield or through missions, and having those achievements duly recognized, do they finally receive the title of knight from their lord and fulfill the purpose of their existence. However, to Lucien, in the end, they are no different from house dogs with expensive collars. That is why they are obligated to show courtesy to the lord who provides them with wealth and honor, and to his lineage as well. But Sir Hendrik, with his arrogant attitude, seems not to understand this. Lucian thinks the low standing of Hendrik's family must have played a role in his insolence, but the real problem is that he acts this way because of the backing he has. If it were up to Lucian, he would tie him to a target and throw knives at him to reforge his mind through intense training methods. He imagines how the knight would tremble if he hurled an axe at his face. But the Grand Duke, his father, would not stand idly by if that happened. Regardless of everything, a knight is a central military power and a vital asset to the family. Punishment without formal procedure would only create unnecessary friction. Lucian clenches his fist, deciding that it is not the time yet. Lucian changes the subject and says to Sir Hendrik, it seems foolish to avoid the training hall simply because of what happened in the past. I plan to come here often from now on, even if it's just to learn the sword forms. He continues, as you said, sir, it's been a year, so I shouldn't be scrambling to catch up. Sir Hendrik responds in disbelief. Sword forms, you say, third young master? He bursts into laughter. You're quite skilled at joking. It's already too late, and yet you wish to learn sword forms now? now? Lucian asks calmly. Too late? Sir Hendrik leans forward and explains smugly. It seems you don't know, so allow me to inform you. If you've passed the age of 15, you can consider it over. Sword forms are the secret techniques and legacy created by our ancestors. Simply imitating the movements grants enlightenment and evolves the physical body. They are the essence of ancestral wisdom. However, he continues, that only makes sense on the premise that the path of mana is open. Since that path closes at 16, it would be nothing more than useless for you. Sir Hendrik concludes with an air of superiority. Sword forms without enlightenment are just an empty shell, nothing more than a dance. With a mocking smile, he steps closer and whispers, now that I think about it, perhaps that would suit you, young master. Why not become the #1 dancer in the Empire? That way you save time and find your true aptitude, don't you? If not, you could simply spend your time gardening. After all, everyone has a role that suits them best. Sir Hendrik thinks smugly. Look at him, speechless and unable to say a thing. But in Lucian's mind, things are very different. First of all, the claim that the mana path closes at 16 is a complete lie, he thinks, and a foolish one that could be exposed with a bit of research. But it doesn't matter. I can feign ignorance later to smooth things over. He continues thinking, and the objective has already been achieved. The objective of presenting the image of a fool crushed by his own ignorance, unable to utter a single rebuttal, a worm mocked by a servant, too terrified to move, showing that same pathetic nature as a year ago. Lucian begins his act. Sir Hendrik, for some reason that seems a bit different from what I know. Lucian refutes him, to the surprise of both Hendrik and Hans. The mana path closes, around the age of 25, not 16, so I understand there's no problem learning, even now. Sir Hendrik, startled, says, Ha! Are you certain of those words at this moment? Lucian presses on. It seems you're mistaken, sir. Does Brother Geordie share this opinion as well? Cornered, Sir Hendrik replies, Of course. It's such obvious common sense. Sir Hendrik feels victorious. This finishes it. As I said, he can't even think of refuting me. Lucian feigns collapse. Yes, that's right. Even my brother said that. Suddenly he grabs his servant Hans by the shoulders and exclaims, Hans! It seems the Valdek family is doomed. Lucian shouts at his terrified servant. You think so too, right? You must. Hans, confused and frightened, can only think, Ye young master, why are you dragging me into this? Dragging me into this? Lucian clutches his head in feigned despair. To think he's confused about common sense that even a stray dog knows. At his age, does that make any sense at all? Lucian continues his dramatic speech. How many talents have been deprived of opportunities because of such incorrect knowledge? Tears cloud my vision. To think my brother possessed a skull so hollow. Lucian shouts, making both Hans and Sir Hendrik flinch, as his theatrical fury erupts. Don't stop me! Lucian roars. If what the knight says is true, then this is a disgrace to the family and a clear crisis, isn't it? With a malicious smile that reveals his true intentions, Lucian leans towards Sir Hendrik. Surely you're not trying to deceive me, the son of your lord, are you? The scene turns chaotic. Completely cornered, Sir Hendrik panics, cold sweat pouring down his face. What do you mean by that? Are you implying that I, a knight, tried to deceive you, young master? Seeing that denial isn't enough, he desperately tries to backtrack. Please forget what I just said. I simply misspoke because I couldn't believe the situation. With a twisted smile, Lucian replies, There's no way a knight of the Valdek family would do something so petty. Right, Sir Hendrik? Sweating and stammering, Hendrik nods. Of course, Lucian answers calmly. Good, I knew it. He continues, In that case, this is a matter we cannot overlook lightly. In his thoughts, Lucian's true intention is clear. I'll teach you what happens when you move your tongue the wrong way. Sir Hendrik, Lucian says, as if unaware of how serious this matter truly is. Hendrik asks what he means, and Lucian explains that if Hendrik had merely intended to humiliate him, he would have let it slide. Continuing his act, Lucian adds, The reason you and everyone else don't look kindly upon me is due to my own shortcomings, forgetting my duty and wasting time in vain. With false humility, he exclaims, How could I possibly reprimand you for that? But then Lucian's tone changes. However, aside from that, if you, a knight, and my brother, the pillar of the Grand Duchy, are obstructing the recruitment of talent with incorrect knowledge, that is something I cannot turn a blind eye to. Lucian argues that this would cause cracks in the military power of the Valdek Knights and, strictly speaking, could become a serious danger to the safety of the people of the territory. As someone who bears the Valdek name, it is only right that I be outraged. While acting, Lucian thinks to himself that he's finally reached the core of the matter. Lucian turns again to Sir Hendrik, who is frozen with fear. Sir Hendrik now clearly understands the gravity of the situation. Lucian lightly pushes him in the chest and warns him, You'd better prepare yourself. With a threatening gaze, Lucian delivers his final blow. I intend to report this to my father and request an internal investigation. Panic seizes Sir Hendrik. Wait, he thinks. This guy used to tremble just hearing my name. Why is he making such a big deal out of this? Hendrik's mind spins. No, this brat was always like this. He was as fragile fragile as a newborn lamb in his fear. But now he sees Lucian not as a lamb, but as a massive, threatening wolf emerging from a dark forest. A gloved hand adjusts a ring set with a red gemstone. A new voice interrupts the scene. What's going on to cause such a commotion? Sir Hendrik looks up in shock, his face twisted with fear and relief.
Lord Geordie!
Lucian, however, smiles inwardly. Right on time, he thinks. Geordie Waldeck, the second son, approaches with an expression of disdain. Is it you again, Lucian Valdeck? The scene continues from the previous chapter. Geordie Waldeck, the second son, confronts Sir Hendrik and his men in the training yard. Sir Hendrik rushes toward Geordie, trying to explain frantically. Second young master, I'll explain. Panicking, Sir Hendrik stammers, unable to form a coherent sentence. It's this situation right now. Geordie cuts him off with a brusque wave of his hand and a single word. Stop. With a condescending smile, Geordie says he doesn't need any explanation. He steps closer, invading Sir Hendrik's personal space, and whispers with an intense gaze. Because I saw your disgraceful behavior with my own eyes. Sir Hendrik's face contorts in fear as Geordie continues his rebuke. To be influenced by a child who hasn't even lived. Half your age is utterly disappointing. He grips Sir Hendrik's shoulder and warns coldly, control your expression. Finally, he releases him and wipes his hand with a handkerchief as if he'd dirtied it. Unless you intend to put me in an even more troublesome position, Geordie turns and strides toward the two figures who have been watching, his younger brother Lucian and Lucian's servant Hans. Terrified, Hans hides behind Lucian, trembling. But Lord Lucian, I think he's very angry. Unlike his servant, Lucian watches the scene with an amused smile, finding his brother's expression entertaining. Indeed, it's quite a spectacle. We are formally introduced to the second son of the Waldeck family, Geordie Waldeck, a worthy successor of a traditional noble house. A true noble among nobles. The background is revealed. It's rumored that Geordie recruited people from outside because his influence was weakened by the first son. He himself announced that he brought them in. Geordie's plan is clear. If he judges these recruits to be useful, he will try to use them to turn the tide in the family's power struggle, maintaining a facade of respect and submission. Lucian greets his older brother with a radiant smile. Greetings to elder brother, Geordie Waldeck. Geordie's expression sours at the greeting. The narrator conveys the chill in Lucian's polite words. It's been a long time, second young master. Have you been well? Geordie wastes no time on pleasantries and calls Lucian foolish. Feigning innocence, Lucian asks what he means by that all of a sudden, and then reveals his card. As for the words you exchanged with Sir Hendrik, I was watching everything with a smile. Geordie directly accuses his younger brother. Did you dare to do something that damages the dignity of the family? Lucian opens his eyes in exaggerated surprise. Damage the dignity? Could you explain so I can understand better? Geordie begins his condescending explanation, saying that since it's been a long time since Sir Hendrik withdrew from the front lines, there seems to have been a mistake. He points out that Hendrik's mistake was using Geordie's name to cause unnecessary chaos, and that he cannot evade responsibility. However, Geordie adopts a magnanimous stance, declaring that he has no intention of reprimanding Hendrik. He claims he knows very well the knight's loyalty and how much blood he has shed for the family, acknowledging the weight of his servant. But that acknowledgement of loyalty becomes a weapon. Geordie casts a contempt-laden glance at Lucian and delivers his final attack. Unlike you, he continues his verbal assault, pointing at Lucian. Furthermore, for someone who couldn't even endure sword training and ran away, do you really think you have the right to accuse him from a position of superiority? He lectures his younger brother. Lucian Waldeck, you must first learn to respect the knights. With an arrogant smile, he revels as he looks at the gathered knights. With an arrogant smile, he revels as he looks at the gathered knights. Because they exist, the Waldeck family can exist. With a broad sweep of his hand, he emphasizes that the family's existence depends on the loyalty of these men. One of the higher-ranking knights steps forward, apologizing on Lucian's behalf. Everyone, I apologize in his stead for today's disturbance. It is the mistake of an immature child, so please show generosity. With a twisted, self-satisfied smile, Geordie thinks to himself, completely pleased with the outcome. I'll take special care of my foolish younger brother. However, Lucian's expression reveals his true thoughts. A cunning smile forms on his face as his mercenary mind analyzes the situation. Ah, so this is how you want to play, he thinks. Lucian understands Geordie's strategy. Although the insults were aimed only at Sir Hendrik, his brother is manipulating the situation to make it seem like an attack on all the knights. Lucian's internal monologue continues to unravel Geordie's plan. He's not only subtly provoking Lucian into insulting them, but also saving face for himself. With a barely perceptible smile, Lucian decides to play along. Fine, I'll grant you that gladly. Lucian begins his his performance, looking at Geordie with an expression of false admiration, as expected of elder brother. Geordie, thrown off by the sudden change, can only respond silently. Placing a hand over his heart, Lucian continues his dramatic speech. Although there was a misunderstanding between Sir Hendrik and me, the proper thing would have been for you to scold me for daring to insult you, elder brother. But instead of that, he exclaims with exaggerated fervor, clutching his collar as if overwhelmed by emotion. To think you would bestow such valuable teachings upon me. As Lucian confesses his supposed verbal crimes, Hans falls into total panic, whispering desperately, "Young master, please, close your mouth." Lucian ignores his servant and concludes his false apology. In any case, I'm ashamed of myself for spewing such disgraceful words. Geordie watches it all with a bright, satisfied smile, believing he has won completely. Raising his fist, Lucian declares his supposed epiphany to all, thanks to his elder brother's benevolence. This younger brother has learned once again today. Lucian turns to the knights and shouts orders to his servant. "Hans, I must record my elder brother's teachings as soon as possible. Paper won't be enough. Better to leave it on the finest silk." Meanwhile, in his mind, he reveals his true objective. By using this, I'll wipe away Lucian's weak image. As Geordie smiles smugly, Lucian's thoughts continue, revealing the second part of his plan, and I'll imprint a clear presence in everyone's minds. Lucian's face twists into an almost manic expression as he shouts his final proclamation internally, that the third young master of the past no longer exists. When his act ends, Lucian's mask falls away, replaced by a chilling calm. He turns to leave and asks a stunned Geordie, "Therefore I intend to take my leave now. Will you permit it?" As he walks away, Lucian adds one last provocation, making the rift between them clear. After all, there's no benefit for either of us in staying together any longer. Geordie's composure finally breaks. Unable to process the challenge, he explodes in fury. "Damn it! It seems you really aren't afraid. Do you think you can just leave like this as if nothing happened?" A close-up of Lucian's golden eye reveals his calm. In a steady voice, he reminds his brother of a crucial piece of information. "You've forgotten." Lucian lays out his checkmate, reminding Geordie of the delicate balance of power. "Father is watching me closely right now. As for me, I have nothing to lose." It is a veiled warning that any scandal will harm Geordie far more than it will harm him. Faced with Geordie's stunned silence, Lucian reads the situation clearly. Turning the situation to his advantage, Lucian calmly turns around and begins to walk away, declaring, "Then I'll take that as your consent." With one final, dramatic farewell, Lucian drags his servant Hans, who is still in a state of shock, away from the scene. "I will take my leave now, elder brother Geordie." In a comedic panel, Lucian hurriedly urges his servant to escape, while Hans screams desperately, "Young master!" Back in the training yard, the silence is suffocating. Sir Hendrik cautiously approaches the furious Geordie, who has his back turned. "Sir Geordie," Sir Hendrik asks in a trembling voice, wondering whether it was truly right to let Lucian leave so easily. Geordie gives no answer. His silence is more threatening than any shout. A close-up reveals the fury boiling inside Geordie. His eyes glow with a golden light, his expression filled with pure rage, promising future revenge. The scene shifts to a quiet path leading away from the mansion, marking the distance Lucian and Hans have put between themselves and the conflict. As they walk, Lucian maintains his composure, but Hans is visibly shaken, hunched over and constantly glancing around in fear. Hans can't take it anymore. He stops and looks back, sweat streaming down his forehead, clearly terrified of what might come next. Finally, he turns to face his master, his voice trembling. "Young master, will everything really be all right?" Lucian stops and listens as Hans continues, reminding him of his brother's ruthless nature. "You know Lord Geordie's personality better than anyone, young master." Hans's fear erupts into a desperate, tearful cry. Reduced to a small, panicked, almost comical animal in his imagination, he envisions the worst-case scenario. "I'll definitely be captured by that terrifying mustached knight without anyone ever knowing." Lucian, without losing his calm, tells him to settle down. Lucian's expression grows serious. Hans's fear triggers a memory from Lucian's past life as a mercenary. That's right, only those who had suffered under that kind of temperament would truly understand. A grim image from his past appears. The flashback continues, showing him in a desperate situation, possibly imprisoned. He recalls the frustration of dealing with an incompetent superior who made matters worse, and then pretended ignorance afterward. With a bitter half-smile, Lucian remembers how utterly miserable it felt. Returning to the present, he reassures his servant, "That won't happen, so get up quickly." Hans looks at him with tear-filled eyes as Lucian firmly assures him, "A mere knight wouldn't dare do such a thing, and I won't allow it either." Lucian bends down toward the kneeling Hans, his voice filled with a newly found empathy. "You've suffered a lot because of me all this time, Hans." Bathed in warm, gentle light, Lucian reflects on his past mistakes, or rather, the mistakes of the original Lucian. When a master acts like like a fool. It's the subordinates who suffer the most. With a tender gesture, Lucian gently pats Hans on the head. Especially since you're my personal attendant, it must have been even harder for you. Deeply moved, Hans can only whisper, "Young master." Lucian's expression sharpens, filled with resolve. His gaze becomes intense as he prepares to make a promise. "I'll promise you one thing." Looking straight into the eyes of his loyal servant, Lucian begins his oath. "From now on, I will never allow my foolish actions to make my people be looked down upon or tremble in fear." His vow echoes beneath the open sky, marking the beginning of a new era. The chapter ends with a powerful symbolic gesture. Lucian firmly takes Hans's hand, sealing his promise and forging a new bond of trust and protection. On a bright sunlit day inside the palace, Lucian and Hans walked silently through the long corridors. Their footsteps echoed faintly, matching the heavy expressions on their faces. Ever since the incident at the training wall, an uneasy feeling had taken root in Lucian's chest. The palace had become far too quiet, dangerously quiet. He knew Geordie, the second young master, better than most. That man was not the type to swallow humiliation and move on. He always retaliated. As Lucian tightened his grip around a folded sheet of paper, his suspicions were finally confirmed. His eyes scanned the document once more, filled with open disgust. "So this is the trick you've been preparing all this time," he muttered coldly. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this day?" Beside him, even Hans, normally timid and soft-spoken, could no longer suppress his anger. His fists clenched tightly as he raised his voice, saying this could not be allowed to pass. Lucian turned to him calmly and asked if he was ready. Hans didn't hesitate. He answered immediately that he was. "How dare he?" Lucian said, his voice sharp and icy. "How dare he touch my allowance?" Hans shouted along with him, adding that his own salary had been cut as well. Lucian explained how everything had started with the budget plan he received that very morning. It was supposed to be a simple day, one where he replenished his funds, bought extra moonlight grass, and stocked up on supplies. That was how things should have gone. But the moment he opened the letter, his expression froze. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. Printed clearly at the top were the words, "Budget Summary." Lucian's allowance had been reduced by 75%. Hans's salary had been cut by 30%. "That bastard," Lucian said quietly. Geordie, the second young master, had laid his hands on his allowance. He had used authority as bait and planted a hex, a spy, through paperwork itself. Even among nobles, embezzlement was a crime punishable by execution. Soon they arrived at a private room. Lucian opened the door, his mind already calm as he reflected on the situation. The only reason this absurd power play had succeeded was because there had been a gap in his defenses. After his mother's passing, Lucian had entrusted budget management to another. That responsibility had once belonged to Dana, the former headmaid, who had served him loyally for years. But now, that authority had ended up in the hands of someone entirely different. A woman stepped forward and bowed politely. She introduced herself, saying it was her first time meeting Lucian face to face. Her name was Jenny, the newly appointed headmaid, assigned to replace Dana. She added that she had wanted to greet him earlier, but at the time, Lucian had shown no intention of leaving his room. With a faint mocking smile, she remarked that his long period of seclusion finally seemed to be over. Hans bristled at her tone and immediately protested, but Lucian raised his hand, signaling him to stop. Calmly, he said that Jenny wasn't wrong. Then, with a faint smile of his own, Lucian stated that they would keep their conversation brief. There was a more important matter to address. Tightening his grip on the paper, he asked her directly whether she had drafted the budget plan and held the document out in front of her. At first, Jenny looked startled. Then she smiled. And then, she laughed. She said she couldn't understand why. Lucian had summoned her over something as trivial as a budget issue. Yes, she admitted that she'd written it. Since Lucian had granted full authority to the former headmaid, she explained, the responsibility had naturally been passed down to her. She had merely carried out the duties entrusted to that position. With a composed smile, she added that this was originally work Lucian should have handled himself. Lucian's expression hardened slightly. He had expected this answer. It was true. This neglect was partly his own fault. Accepting that, he nodded and said he understood. However, something still did not sit right. Calmly, he pointed out that the majority of the funds allocated by his father were meant to raise servant salaries, meant to compensate for his past neglect. As he spoke, the surrounding maids began to tremble. Their eyes darted nervously between Lucian and Jenny. Lucian then asked a simple question. "If that is the case," he said evenly, "why was Hans's salary cut instead of raised?" His gaze sharpened. "Isn't that far too blatant?" Jenny smiled once more, feigning surprise. She claimed there must have been a mistake. After all, managing an entire household involved countless responsibilities. Turning slightly, she asked the others if they could testify to how overworked she was. Immediately, the surrounding staff nodded in agreement. One after another, they awkwardly voiced their support, shifting the blame onto themselves and insisting it must have been an oversight. Lucian watched quietly. Then he spoke. "Enough." His calm voice carried unmistakable authority. The room fell silent at once. Stepping forward, Lucian said that while the body might belong to one master, the hands and feet were clearly obeying another. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. He looked directly at Jenny. "I'll ask you one final question," he said. "Answer carefully." His eyes narrowed. "Do you know who the master you were truly supposed to serve?" Jenny's smile faded. Her reply came sharp and cold. "If you want an answer," she said, "you'll have to ask Lord Geordie." Ah! The scene shifted. A dark alley stretched ahead, damp and narrow. Lucian walked forward, his thoughts steady but ruthless. Infected flesh had to be cut away for the body to survive, even if the process was painful. His heart beat faster with each step. At the corner of the alley stood a rowdy bar, loud voices spilling out into the street. Lucian and Hans entered, both cloaked and disguised. Hans glanced around and frowned. "I thought you said you were going fishing to calm your mind," he muttered. "This place doesn't exactly match that image." Lucian ignored him. His gaze locked onto the center of the bar, where two fighters were brawling brutally while spectators cheered wildly. People shouted bets, screaming for blood and victory. Hans smiled faintly and leaned closer. "Looks like the perfect place to catch a big fish." They moved to the counter. The bartender, wiping a glass, eyed them suspiciously and warned that this wasn't a place for shady figures to linger. Without a word, Lucian placed a heavy sack on the counter. The bartender froze. Lucian removed his disguise and asked calmly why a gambling bar was being so picky about its customers. He questioned whether the man even wanted business. There were several reasons Lucian had not dealt with the head maid rashly. First, Jenny was no ordinary maid. She was the daughter of the nanny who had raised Geordie since infancy. Acting against her carelessly would only worsen the situation and invite unnecessary backlash. Second, and more importantly, this situation existed because of Lucian's own mistake. Before reincarnating and taking over this body, he simply hadn't known how to handle matters like this. He had entrusted authority without fully understanding the consequences, assuming that such an unreasonable situation could never arise. Reality proved otherwise. Lucian realized this problem went beyond common sense. It required a proper response, and this time he would not be lenient. More than that, there was no way the archduke was unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. In other words, resolving this mess was not just necessary, it was part of a test. If that was the case, then Lucian would show him. As these thoughts passed through his mind, the same staff member from earlier led him through the bar, once again, and seated him comfortably at a table. Cards were scattered across its surface, clear evidence of countless games already played. Lucian picked up a deck, his expression calm. Since he was already here, he might as well make some money too. Before long, the man sitting across from him was visibly trembling. A large crowd had gathered, watching in stunned disbelief. How many rounds had Lucian won in a row? His opponent was supposed to be a seasoned gambler, yet he looked completely crushed. Finally, the shaking man spoke up. "I quit." Lucian casually flipped a coin between his fingers as the man hurriedly withdrew. "This is only the beginning," Lucian said lightly. "Things are just starting to get interesting. Why not stay a little longer?" The man paled and refused at once, saying it would be better for him to leave now. Beside Lucian, Hans stood frozen, clutching his head. When did the young master gain such terrifying skill? Clearly bored, Lucian leaned back in his chair and rested one leg on the table. "Next round," he announced calmly. "Isn't there anyone else willing to play?" He had come here to spread rumors, but this felt underwhelming. Lowering his gaze, Lucian thought that after taking so much from them, it was about time for the real target to show himself. Almost on cue, the door opened. Lucian glanced sideways and saw a man entering while adjusting his buttons. He wore a polite smile, but his presence alone caused the atmosphere to shift. Well, the man said smoothly. "I failed to recognize someone important. Please forgive my late greeting." He stopped in front of Lucian and introduced himself. "My name is Hugo," he said. "I am the manager of this establishment." With a snap of his fingers, a butler appeared instantly. The man bowed deeply and announced that the bar would be closing for the day due to unavoidable circumstances. Servants quickly moved through the room, delivering the same message and escorting all guests outside. They promised generous compensation on their next visit. Turning back to Lucian, Hugo spoke respectfully. "It may inconvenience other customers," he said, "but that is a small price to pay if Lord Lucian can enjoy his time in comfort." Lucian smiled faintly. "It's been a long time since I last went out," he said. "You have a sharp eye." Then he added casually, "That kind of intuition is necessary to survive in this line of work." Hugo bowed again and apologized for his delayed greeting. Lucian waved it off, saying he had only come for a change of pace. Hugo's gaze drifted to the coins piled high on the table. He admitted that it was astonishing. It had been a long time since he had seen a guest stack the pot like this. Then he looked back at Lucian and spoke again. "May I ask," Hugo said politely, "if you would allow me to be your opponent?" Lucian met his gaze. Hugo smiled calmly. "I wouldn't stand a chance against the young master, but..." As the manager, Hugo had picked up a few tricks over the years. At the very least, it would help pass the time. At that moment, Hans stepped closer and whispered urgently, "Master, we should go home. We've already won enough, and I have a very bad feeling about this man." Hans had seen countless frightening figures in the palace, but Hugo's presence was different, truly one of a kind. Lucian acknowledged Hans's instincts with a faint nod. He hadn't become a personal attendant for nothing. Just by glancing at Hugo's hands, Lucian knew exactly who he was. A black shark, Hugo. Lucian remembered him from his previous life. Rougher, more ruthless, a name destined to one day shake the underground. Hugo's journey had begun in the dark alleys of the city. Armed with nothing but brute strength and cunning, he had crushed every obstacle in his path. He expanded into gambling, smuggling, and even contract killings, eventually becoming the king of the night, ruling 5 territories from the shadows. Later, exploiting the Empire's instability, he declared himself a baron and re-emerged as one of its warlords. But for now, Lucian noted, he was still a rookie. Even so, that only made him more dangerous. Lucian smiled faintly. Today he had come to catch this shark. As the cards were spread across the table, Lucian suggested keeping the game simple. Hugo agreed immediately and removed any upper limit on the betting. I cannot allow the young master to grow bored after coming all this way, he said politely. Lucian's expression brightened. Finally, someone who understands me. Behind him, Hans grew even more anxious. Hugo maintained his polite smile, but inwardly, he dismissed Lucian as a spoiled brat, relying on his family name. He didn't realize that the words they had just exchanged would soon become the foundation of his own downfall. As the dealer prepared the cards, Hugo thought the timing was perfect. Even though his planted gambler's losses hadn't gone according to plan, he subtly tapped the table. The dealer noticed. Hugo believed that someone like Lucian would sink deeper the more he lost. He intended to devour him down to the bone. At the table, Lucian beamed cheerfully, as if nothing was amiss. Hugo, suspicious, asked if something was wrong. Lucian replied casually that it was nothing. But before they began, he had a question. Hugo assured him he would answer honestly. Lucian leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. Although we are meeting for the first time, I have to admit, I've already taken quite a liking to you. A leader can be judged by his subordinates alone. Managing an operation of this scale, even illegally, is no simple feat. If you had crossed the line, you would have been eliminated long ago. Hugo's smile remained polite, but he stiffened slightly. I understand my position, he said carefully. I make sure not to offend my superiors. Lucian chuckled softly. Don't be so stiff. Even though I come from House Weldon, we are not inflexible. He peered at his cards for a moment before asking calmly, when do you plan to begin large-scale production? Hugo froze. What are you talking about? Lucian smiled faintly, leaning back. Don't pretend. I've seen the signs, Hugo. Lucian's gaze sharpened as he spoke, bringing up the word that carried weight in the room. Illegal. The moment it left his mouth, the atmosphere grew heavy, suffocating. Even the servants began to sweat nervously. Hans stiffened beside him, his eyes wide with unease. Hugo froze in place, his body suddenly rigid, as if an unseen force had struck him. Trying to maintain his composure, Hugo forced a smile and asked cautiously what Lucian meant, pretending to misunderstand. He claimed ignorance, insisting he had never heard of anything illegal. Lucian did not respond immediately. Instead, he calmly placed more coins on the table, the action deliberate and unsettling. There is no need to pretend, he said softly. I heard you clearly. Asking again is pointless. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on Lucian's lips as he revealed the truth. Hugo had been commissioned by the Marquis Lauren family to destabilize Waldick territory through illegal drug distribution. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Lucian's gaze turned cold, a hand waving lazily but decisively. For a Marquis family to give such cheap and reckless orders, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. There is clearly no respect. There is a line that should never be crossed, and you have crossed it. Do you agree? Hugo said nothing. Sweat rolled down his face and his breathing became uneven. Lucian's calm eyes bore into him, unyielding. I must admit, he continued, there is something almost impressive about your audacity. Smuggling illegal drugs into another city, especially into Waldick territory, takes a certain nerve. But the compliment was sharp as a blade. The moment something goes wrong, Lucian warned, and you are caught, everyone associated with Waldick will tear you apart. Not one person will hesitate. Not a single soul will show mercy. The pressure in the room intensified, thickening the air. Lucian observed Hugo in silence, noting the chaos in his mind. Failure now meant death. His plan had been exposed before it even began, and the opponent standing before him was the Waldick family, one of the deadliest forces he could face. Normally, this operation would have remained hidden for another 2 years. By that time, the drug reports would finally reach the Grand Duke, and Hugo would have fled the city. But Lucian's experience allowed him to see the situation before it spiraled out of control. Finally, Hugo forced a shaky response. He claimed it was a misunderstanding. Lucian's lips curled faintly as he repeated the words slowly, deliberately. What exactly is being misunderstood? Trembling, Hugo insisted he was nothing more than a small-time shop owner, barely scraping by. He swore that dealing drugs made no sense and that someone jealous of him must have spread a false rumor. If given the chance, he claimed, he would uncover the source himself. Lucian cut him off coldly. A false rumor, he said, his tone almost amused. Just like the flour mill you run is supposedly a normal shop, and the underground passage beneath it is merely A secret escape route leading outside the castle. He leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving. Hugo, this is the last question I will ask. What stage are you at right now? Hugo was completely stunned. Words failed him. Sweat poured down his face, his body trembling. As the weight of Lucien's knowledge pressed down, the silence stretched, thick with dread, while Lucien's calm, unyielding gaze left no room for pretense. At last, Hugo collapsed back into his chair, his body trembling. For a fleeting moment, his thoughts cleared. Lucien knew. He knew about the fake shop and the secret passage. Excuses were meaningless now. A dangerous thought flickered in Hugo's mind. Should I kill him? The servants sensed the shift in the air. One by one, they subtly moved, hands inching toward their weapons. After all, a noble without guards could be struck down in the middle of a conversation. Before Hugo could act, Lucien's voice cut through the tension, cold and sharp. Think carefully before making a foolish move. The chip in this gamble is your own life. Hans trembled behind Lucien, fear etched clearly across his face. Hugo's clenched fists loosened slowly. Lucien's words reminded him of how far he had worked to climb to this position. What kind of stupid thought was that? He scolded himself internally. Attacking a successor of the Waldeck family would be no different than begging for death. His mind raced as he imagined the consequences if he were caught. The punishment would be far worse than a quick death. Slowly, Hugo closed his eyes and exhaled. He chose survival. Lowering his head, he begged Lucien to spare him. There must be a reason. Lucien had come personally instead of ordering his execution. Otherwise, his head would already be rolling across the floor. Desperation overtook him. If you tell me to be a dog, he said, voice trembling, I will be a dog. If you order me to bark, I will bark. If you order me to crawl, I will crawl. The moment he spoke, all the servants dropped to their knees, pleading for mercy. Lucien remained silent for a heartbeat, then slowly stood. A dog to keep around wasn't such a bad idea. He just needed hands and feet he could trust. Relief surged through Hugo's body. He repeatedly thanked Lucien, swearing he would obey any order without hesitation. Lucien stepped closer, then abruptly stopped. Simply being a hunting dog sounds boring, he said thoughtfully. Hugo wasn't the type to be satisfied with that forever. He placed a hand on Hugo's shoulder and asked a single, unexpected question. Do you want to try becoming a knight? Hugo's eyes widened. The room fell silent for a moment. All attention fixed on him. Becoming a knight had once been his dream, something he had pursued obsessively, but reality had crushed it. No matter how skilled he became, he had always been risking his life for a master, reduced to a disposable tool for nobles. His low birth seemed an unchangeable barrier. Do I want to become a knight? Hugo pressed his forehead to the floor. If given the chance, he said, voice full of raw desperation, I would even sell my soul. Please, tell me it's possible. Lucien answered without hesitation. I swear on the honor of the Waldeck family, if you hold integrity and honor, and do not shame yourself in the future, then mere status will never be a stumbling block. He leaned closer, voice soft but commanding. One final question. Do you want to live as a person, not as a tool? Hope, something Hugo had not felt in years, filled his chest. A few days later, inside the palace, the servants gathered, tense and curious. Lucien appeared at the front, sitting casually with one leg resting on the table. Hans and Hugo stood behind him. Lucien turned his gaze toward Hugo and said, calm yet commanding, introduce yourself. Hugo stiffened slightly, clasping his hands behind his back. He stepped forward and introduced himself in a calm, measured tone. I am Hugo, he said, and I will be assisting the Lord from today. A sharp, restrained smile formed on his face, like a hunter quietly assessing his surroundings. I look forward to working with everyone, he added. Sometime later, inside the palace, Lucien sat calmly at the center of the room, while the servants formed a semicircle around him. He clapped his hands lightly. Now that introductions are finished, he said, his voice even. Bring the headmaid in. One of the servants hesitated. Why summon the headmaid so suddenly? He asked. Lucien swung a finger casually. The headmaid needs to greet me, he said. His mind drifted briefly to the previous day, recalling how she had scolded him without restraint. We cannot allow such behavior again, he added silently. The servants would need to report properly first, no matter how busy she was. Lucien observed their reactions with quiet interest. As expected, the servants were uneasy. The one who had questioned him looked around nervously. Everyone, don't do anything rash, he muttered. Another quickly agreed, adding, we don't want to get dragged into trouble. Lucien realized then that their fear had reached a point where words alone would not sway them. To their eyes, he must seem like a weak, expendable figure, a rotten rope barely worth holding on to. If that was their perception, he would make sure they understood otherwise. A servant stepped forward from the middle of the room, speaking cautiously. Please, Lord Lucien, consider our situation. Lord Geordie pays special attention to the headmaid. What authority do mere servants like us possibly have? As soon as he finished, others immediately chimed in. They nodded and murmured agreement, pleading with Lucien to be understanding. Why fan the flames deliberately? They asked. We only wish to leave quietly as before. The overlapping voices grew louder. Hans could no longer contain his frustration. He clenched his teeth, his voice rising. Get a grip! He shouted, his eyes glinting with suppressed anger. The master of this palace is Lord Lucian, not the second master, Lord Geordie. Hugo watched the entire scene quietly from the side, a faint smile playing on his lips. He stepped forward and calmly addressed Hans. Leave this matter to me, he said. Then he turned to the servants, his tone sharp and controlled. Sharp words are wasted on people like you. You are not the type who would listen. Turning back to Lucian, Hugo added, I have already identified what needs to be done. Lucian raised an eyebrow, mild curiosity flickering across his face. You already have an idea? Hugo's expression turned cold. Dealing with people who do not know their place is simple. Loyalty can be drilled into them, though the process may be a little rough. May I have your permission? The servants' faces turned pale as the weight of Hugo's words settled over them. Lucian listened quietly, then allowed a faint smile to form. Hugo really is quick thinking, he thought. That was precisely why he had recruited him. Luck had also favored them. Hugo had been caught early, while the drug operation was still in its nascent stage. If it had progressed further, even Lucian might not have been able to intervene. Placing a hand on Hugo's shoulder, Lucian granted his permission. This was exactly what he had wanted. With a faint, satisfied smile, he observed as Hugo prepared to act. A villainous smile curled on Lucian's lips as he spoke. Hugo, do not worry. Give them a proper show. Hugo answered calmly, his tone steady and controlled. I will follow your command. A chill ran down the spines of the servants. They watched, frozen, as Hugo walked toward the servant standing in the middle of the room. Up close, the servant realized the sheer weight of Hugo's presence. Standing before him felt like an ant facing a towering wall. He forced himself to calm down. After all, Hugo was just an outsider, a newly recruited subordinate. Gritting his teeth, the servant finally spoke. Do not step forward without understanding the situation, he warned. If you want to survive, choose the right side. Hugo's cold gaze fell on him. Do you have any idea, he asked softly, how cruel the people backing you truly are? The servant scoffed, trying to mask his fear. Surely you're not foolish enough to risk your life for a few coins? Hugo clenched his fist. Those are truly pathetic last words, he murmured. The servant frowned, confused. What? Before he could finish, Hugo struck. The punch landed with brutal precision. The servant flew across the hall, crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. His face immediately swelled and distorted, and consciousness slipped away from him like water through fingers. The hall fell into stunned silence. Hans froze, color draining from his face. The other servants instinctively recoiled as Hugo calmly walked past the fallen body. Finally, one servant shouted, voice trembling with fear and anger. This has gone too far. Violence like this is unacceptable. Even if the young master brought Hugo here, he does not have the right to act this way. Hugo turned slowly, his gaze heavy and irritated. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and lethal. I have more than enough authority to act. My specialty is educating crazy bastards who do not know their place. The servants instinctively stepped back, shrinking from his presence. Moments later, heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Before anyone could react, the large doors at the far end were thrown open. Two servants dragged someone inside. It was the headmaid. She struggled violently, shouting, Let me go! Do you think you can get away with this? One of the servants snapped sharply. Shut your mouth and follow quietly. If you still cannot understand, then you truly are foolish. Fury lit her eyes, and she turned sharply toward him. But the moment she looked inside the hall, her words died in her throat. Servants knelt on both sides of the room, bruised, trembling, and utterly subdued. Lucian stood near the window, his back to the room, calmly gazing outside as if nothing unusual had occurred. A servant hurriedly spoke. As instructed, we have brought the headmaid. Lucian slowly turned, his expression composed, a faint smile touching his lips. She is finally here, he said. His tone was light, almost casual. I merely asked the servants to bring her over, though it seems they became a little too enthusiastic. Shock quickly turned to fury. The headmaid's eyes blazed. What is the meaning of this? Do you think you can get away with such behavior? She forcefully freed one arm, raising it threateningly. Lord Geordie will never allow this. The tone stays controlled, cold, and cinematic. Ah! Stand. The headmaid straightened her posture, forcing herself to appear composed. If you stop now, she said sharply, I will make sure today's incident ends here. Lucian smiled, completely unbothered. Whoever said anything about ending this? He replied calmly. He reached over to the table and picked up a whip, gripping it firmly with both hands. The leather creaked softly as he lifted it. This, Lucian said evenly, is only the beginning. The moment the headmaid saw the whip, her confidence shattered. The color drained from her face. Her lips trembled as she hurriedly spoke, her voice cracking. You can say whatever you want. I take back what I said earlier. Lucian's smile vanished. In its place was a cold, emotionless gaze, devoid of hesitation, devoid of mercy. Today, he said quietly, each word cutting deep. You will die right here.